Karibuni, karibuni. It's been a minute since we did the Let's Talk series, right? A whole lot of things have happened and changed in between. So tomorrow, September, we've had a lot of things happen, right? Tomorrow, September 13th, is going to be the inauguration of the new president in Kenya. Some of us might have known the elections were on August 9th, and then the Supreme Court of Kenya made the final decision, I believe last week on Monday. And so the inauguration is this coming Tuesday, tomorrow. And as with all elections everywhere, there's always the winning side and the side that did not win. There's always passionate campaigning on both sides. And there's a lot of feelings, residual feelings left. And I know this particular one affected a lot of families. People had different views, different beliefs on candidates. And believe me, we know a little bit about that here where I am. I'm in Florida, in the US right now, and we know a little bit about having different opinions about candidates and elections. So my concern in being in touch with family and friends at home was helping us process some of the thoughts and emotions that we have. Some of the schools of thought, there are different schools of thought. The first one is that depending on how you're feeling, if you've experienced the loss because your candidate did not win, there's disappointment. And a lot of people are disappointed and you've moved on because you have school, you have work, you have families, you have life, you have things to do. And so you're living with that disappointment while looking to the future. And then the other side, we have people who are excited and celebrating the candidate. They're also moving on with their lives, school, work, and families. But my compassion was a lot more with people who are experiencing what we call election stress, post-election stress. We've experienced that here, and the mental health field began putting out material to help people, I believe over the last 8 to 16 years, helping people be able to figure out how to deal with those feelings. And I know at home we've also had the discussions about, was it right, was it not? Is it the end of dynasties, is it not? So all those feelings can stir up a lot of emotions. So today I wanted to help us be able to navigate that. So as I said, a lot of my compassion is with people who have experienced it as a disappointment and how to thrive and grow despite that feeling of disappointment. If you're a person of faith, first of all, I want to remind us of what the Lord's promise is, that He does not only prosper you in the season of your chosen person, He will also prosper you and make a way in the desert. He's the same God who creates ways out of no ways. In Psalm 23, He says, He prepares a table before me in the presence, not of my friends, but of enemies. And sometimes enemies are people who you don't agree with, in terms of people who oppose you, right? So that's the approach that I want to come at it from, in helping us see that this is not the end of what is possible in your life, in your family's life during this season. And also looking at what are the things that are in your control and what things are not in your control, because that's the part that leads us to stress, right? So everybody followed the procedure. The results were announced. The court process went through, and pretty much everyone is back to doing life. We've been in conversations with you guys, with family, with friends who are out and about, in and around doing business. But the mental health piece is important to me. And I wanted to share something about how to figure out what is in your control and what is not in your control. So I want to share this image right here. Out of control and what is out of my control and what is in my control, right? So things that are out of my control, for example, out of your control are the actions of others. So if you've been online at all, you've seen some of the reactions that people have had about this, whether it's about this issue or other things that are happening in your life. Because we also have a friend, a dear friend of ours who lost their parent at home. And we have friends who are going through various challenges right now. And the biggest question I want to ask you right now is what is out of your control? So the actions of others are out of your control because you cannot influence or change their actions, right? The past is not in your control because it's literally gone. We don't have the capacity to time travel, at least the regular binadamu, the regular human, right? The opinions of others are not in your control. People will have whatever opinion they want to have. If you're online, you've seen the crazy posts, the funny posts, funny memes. Some of them are not so funny. Analysis, all of that. And it might be your family too, having opinions about how you feel about whatever the situation is that's going on, whether it's the election, and also whether it's the results, whether it's the inauguration tomorrow. And let's talk about this part too. The death of Queen Elizabeth has brought up a lot of things for us as Africans and as Kenyans, knowing that a lot of history was written in Kenya with colonialism, and our parents telling us the stories, and our grandparents telling us the stories of how colonialism directly affected them because they lived in it. So it's a lot of things tied in together, right? The other part we don't have any control, you don't have any control over is what happens around you, right? What happens around you will happen. The outcome of your efforts is not in your control. Our efforts are in our control, but the outcome is not in our control. We can do our absolute best about something, but when the result comes out, it might not be what we expected it to be. So the outcome is not in your control, even though the efforts are in your control, right? And then the future is definitely not in our control. Case in point, we all know things in life that happen that we thought we had it locked down, and then it's not locked down. The future can change literally in a second. You can receive a phone call and your future has immediately changed for the best, for the better, and sometimes it's changed because of grief, as some of our friends are going through right now. So the future is not in our control, but if you're a person of faith, we also believe the future is in God's control, right? Also, out of your control is how others take care of themselves. So you cannot control that. You can share information with them, but you can't control that, right? This is the hardest part. What other people think of you, what other people think of me, that's not in my control. That's not in our control. That's not in your control. You might want to influence it, but it's not in your control. So I should say what other people's comments are about everything else that's going on. It might upset you. It might be making you feel so downtrodden already while you're down. I've seen a lot of comments about, please just let us heal. Don't rub it in our faces. And I've also seen people who are compassionate also saying, don't belittle their win, how they're celebrating their win, right? So what other people think of you is not in your control. So let's look at what do we have that is in our control. And I'm looking at the comments as well. And what is in your control is your thoughts and actions. And that sounds like a circle, right? Like my thoughts and actions are in my control, but my thoughts and actions are going crazy. Yes, that happens. I've been working with clients a lot on how to control our thoughts, how to navigate thoughts when our thoughts are racing, because we're upset about an issue, because we're stressed out about an issue, because we're worried about an issue, because we're depressed about an issue, how to manage your thoughts. And the main thing about our thoughts is literally deciding, is the thought that I'm having about this issue valid or not valid? Do I have evidence to prove that the thought that I have about this issue is real or not? If it's a real issue, we go back to the outer question, right? Is this issue in my control or out of my control? So you're literally following the logical steps with your thoughts. So if the thought says I should be able to do this, is it valid or not valid? And then is it an issue that's within my control or not? If it's within my control, what are my gifts, abilities, giftings, to be able to control or to do something about this issue that my mind and my thoughts are focused on, right? And then you go from there. But if it's out of your control, then you look around and say, this issue is bugging me, is stressing me out. Is there somebody I can delegate? Can I talk to somebody about it? Because this is out of my control. I cannot do this. And that way you're able to delegate your thoughts, or even tell your thoughts, this is not valid. This is not a valid worry that you should be having, right? The other thing that's within our control is what you give your energy to. And this is a lesson that we've all learned hard within the last couple of years, right? Especially on social media, especially as we watch coverage on TV, especially as we interact with groups of different people who believe different things about different topics on earth. We've discovered that what you give your energy to grows. So if all we experience online is giving rage energy, just raging about stuff, then that's how we're going to feel all day. Your blood pressure is going to go up because you're giving your energy to things that only bring you rage and anger and sadness. But you can choose to give your energy to something that is positive. You can choose to focus on what is in your control, what you have capacity to do about the issue, right? So I want to challenge us about that. I have 10 minutes. I was going to do this for 31 minutes or so, and then I'll be out of here. And thank you again to everybody who's sending me direct messages. Thank you. I know sometimes it's hard to ask stuff online on a live video, so I will be getting. I'll be responding to you privately, and that's okay, because I know these are tough topics, and sometimes you don't want to talk about them in a public forum. That's okay. I will be responding to you accordingly. So please watch what you're giving your energy to. Next one, how I speak to myself, how you speak to yourself about any issue that's going on. Because if you put yourself down, if you decide that you're not going to succeed because of what's going on, if you decide that life is over because things changed, there's a new leader in place, or there's a whole new system at work, for example, or something is happening in your personal relationship, and you decide to speak to yourself in a negative way, then your mind absorbs that, your spirit absorbs that, your soul absorbs that, your subconscious absorbs that, and works really hard to make that happen. So how we speak to ourselves is part of the self-sabotaging system, where when we say absolutely negative things, our system inside works to make that happen, because our mind and our system inside wants to have congruency between the inner self and the outer self. So how we speak to ourselves about issues really, really matters. So if you don't have anything that you can think about that you would speak positively about yourself, then don't say anything to yourself at all, right? Just wait until you're able to. And some of the things you might say might just be, I'm glad that I got up today, because maybe you're experiencing a really tough time in your season. Something that's in our control is the goals that you've set for yourself. We have about 3 months before the end of the year, actually less than 2 months and a couple of weeks, right? Today is September 12th. So the goals that you've set for yourselves are within your control, right? So it's adjusting. What can you realistically do within the next 2 months? Again, not setting yourself up for failure. So as you watch from family and friends at home, as you watch the inauguration tomorrow, if you do, because you have a choice whether to or not, I'll be watching, I'll catch most of it. I know I'll be in between work here because we're about 7 hours behind Nairobi. So I know I'll be watching, I'll try to catch as much of it as I can. But I want us to think about the goals that you set for yourself. and how you're able to process that and how you're able to adjust that for the next couple of weeks, right? The other thing is how you spend your free time right now. How are you going to be spending your free time? Because that's within your control. So spend your free time with something that feeds your energy and doesn't take away your energy. In your control is also how you handle challenges. That's within your control, how you choose to handle the challenge. And sometimes it's saying, I can't handle it, I need help, and knowing who to talk to, right? We are blessed in that if you've grown in a culture that believes in community, there are people that we can talk to. We can talk to family, we can talk to trusted friends, we can talk to mentors, you can talk to spiritual leaders, if you trust them, if their word has meant something to you in the past, right? To be able to help you figure out how to handle certain challenges, business mentors, coaching mentors, school teachers, counselors, therapists, whoever you need to talk to help you be able to figure out how to handle your challenges, right? The other thing that is the final thing in your control is your boundaries, how you set up your boundaries and what you do with your boundaries. So boundaries means being able to say yes or no based on your capacity. So our oldest son has a saying that really spoke to my husband and I when a couple of years back. He used to tell us, my social battery is gone. So that was his way of saying that he doesn't have the capacity to have conversations anymore. So that would be him telling us, or telling me, because I do the parent pickups in the afternoon, answering a few questions, how was school, how is this, and then saying, okay, mom, my battery is out. I don't have any more time to answer questions. Let's talk later in the evening. So that means just give them time. So he's setting a boundary of when he'll be able to talk again. So I want us to think about the boundaries of saying yes and no when you need to, right? Because that's really, really important. There's something it's about self-care and actually focusing your energy on what is truly helpful for you. So I want you to think of your boundaries as reallocating your resources. I'm going to say that again. Boundaries as reallocating your resources. You yourself are a resource. So if people are coming to you for help and you don't have the capacity at the time because either you don't have the time, you don't have the gifting, or your energy needs to be focused on something else, then it's okay to say, to tell the people, I don't have the capacity to do that right now, or I'm sorry, I'm not available for this right now. I will let you know when I'm available to do that. Boundaries are a huge way of doing self-care and getting yourself to focus on what you really should be focusing on, all right? So I'm watching our ticking time here, and I'm going to share, I'm going to stop sharing this one, and I'm going to share yet another one, right? About coping with post-election stress. So family and friends, anybody who's dealing with this. And to be honest, here in the US, we're also in an election season also. The midterm elections are coming up. We've already had some primary elections. We've had friends who are involved in elections. One of our friends won her election here. So we're still gonna be dealing with this up until December, right? So number one, this was a document put together by the Crisis Counseling Text Hotline, which is the 741-741 here in the US. But this information applies to all of us, no matter where we are. Number one is acknowledging and accepting your feelings. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced a feeling of being stuck. You're in so much grief or anger or disappointment that you feel absolutely stuck. You feel like you can't move forward. and your mind just feels like you've hit a wall and you can't move back, right? So acknowledging and accepting your feelings really, really helps, because this tells your mind, let go, you're seeing the reality of it. The reason we feel stuck is when our system on the inside, or our inner beings, can tell that we're not being honest with our outer being. I'm going to say that again. When our inner being and our outer being can tell that we are not in sync with each other, right? So acknowledging and accepting your feelings means it's normal to feel stressed and disappointed about the issue. It doesn't mean you accept it, but it means you're acknowledging this is what's happening. And then talk to somebody if you need to. Listen to other people, ask open-ended questions, but also I want to say be careful who you listen to, right? Because you also don't want to give your ears when you're vulnerable, when your spirit is open, when your heart is hurting, when your mind is hurting, when your whole being is hurting. You don't want to give yourself over to somebody who does not have your good in mind. So I want to say listening to others means choosing somebody who you know will have your well-being in mind. Not that they will give you things that you agree with, but they have your well-being in mind, right? And then the last one is write it down. If you don't feel like talking, because sometimes the feelings that you have are so deep and intense. And if you're noticing a pattern, this is the same, kind of the same work that we use when working with grief, a bit of depression and a bit of anxiety. It's the same, almost the same material that we use when working with clients about that. So writing it down is a way of pouring out your feelings on paper, so that you can unravel your thoughts. Remember when we talked about thoughts at the beginning, being in control or out of control with your thoughts? So another way of being in control of your thoughts is this writing it down, because I used to share with clients, especially younger clients when I have children or teenagers. I still do this with adults. I tell them to write it on a piece of paper, but if they're kids, I tell them to do this. Think about the issue and think as if you're stripping it off of your mind and putting it in a bowl. And so the bowl knows it's holding the thought that you are worried about, right? So it's a physical way of saying, write it down, then choose, are you going to focus on this thought? Is it valid? Is it real? And then you symbolically can choose a way to get rid of it, whether it's throwing it down or you want to put it in a prayer box, something to pray about. In other words, write it down and or say it, record it on your phone if you need to. I'm not a big fan of recording things electronically for reasons that are everywhere in the news. I prefer putting things down on paper, but that's up to you. Sometimes all you have is a phone as you're driving. Just write it down and get the stress out of your mind, okay? So I'm gonna stop sharing right now. And I am so glad that we got to do this. I don't want to talk for too long, and I will be back again. I wanted to also mention about the issue that we're dealing with, the confusion we're feeling about the whole end of the Elizabethan era, right? So there's been a lot of friends, and of course, African, if you go on Black Twitter, Irish Twitter, it's quite interesting on there, right? And there's confusion because there's two things can be true at the same time. I want to say that. I want to start this 2-minute script with that. Two things can be true at the same time. Various truths can exist at the same time, all right? You could be somebody who has watched the monarchy, because a lot of our customs in Kenya were based off of that, right? We were a colony. We drink tea with milk. I'm not saying that we started drinking tea with milk after that, because we had tea farms before then, right? But there's a lot of customs when you think about. I just watched the proceedings, right? The way they addressed the court was my lady, my lords, right? We were all joking about that. My learned friends, we were all joking about that online. So there are customs that have been absorbed from the former colonialists, right? So there's that feeling of resentment or confusion, or we are over that. At the same time, you're watching the traditions and watching literally a 1,000-year tradition replay itself over and over. And what does that mean? You don't have to choose a side. That's why we say various truths can exist at the same time. And there's nuance in what you believe and what you feel about this. Now, when we listen to our parents, because we all have stories. I have stories of my mom growing up, my mom telling me about the period of the emergency, when the emergency was declared, I believe it was 1952 to 1962 or 1961. As a child, when they had to run and hide in the farms, in my grandfather's farm during that period of the emergency, because of colonialism and the war and all that, what they were doing, trying to rout out the freedom fighters, the Mau Mau, all that, right? We literally live with that. Our parents, who are generation boomers, Kenyan boomers, African boomers, literally lived through that, right? So they have stories. Our grandfathers have very harrowing stories about it. And while we're honoring and acknowledging their stories, it does not mean that three things cannot, or various truths cannot happen at the same time. When you're also looking at progress or any progress made, acknowledging any progress made does not make the atrocities any less, okay? So what does that have to do with moving on? Because it feels as though all these things are tied. And I don't want to get too deep into the macro of things on the world on the world stage and what that all means, because that's a conversation for another day. On realignments on earth, the heavens, what that means, that's a whole other conversation that I don't want to get into right now. But the end of the Elizabethan era means a lot. It is a symbol, it is a signal, and for us to be starting a new season in many ways is also a symbol. And I want to say again, listen to what your spirit is telling you, and realize what is in your control and out of your control, so that you know what you can truly handle, what you can handle, what you need to delegate, what thoughts are valid, what thoughts are not valid, and what to do with the thoughts that are not valid. I just want to close by saying that worry, if you're somebody who worries, worry is a thought. Worry comes on because of thinking and ruminating over issues. And then when worry grows, it becomes anxiety. And anxiety is a feeling of worry. In other words, anxiety is a feeling of thoughts, because thoughts create worry. Worry creates anxiety. Anxiety is that feeling in our body. Anxiety unchecked exacerbates stress, and sometimes, not always, sometimes moves into depression. So I'm trying to make sure that we don't get there yet. And I just wanted to give this little talk about that today. So thank you, everybody. Take care. God bless you. And I will keep in touch. Thank you again for the messages. I'm seeing some messages on Messenger, and for you guys who have my phone number, thank you for the text. All right, take care. God bless you.